Imagine being 18 years old, stepping on a tennis court in front of thousands of screaming fans, with the weight of an entire nation's hopes resting on your shoulders. You're the underdog. You're playing for the biggest title of your life. And suddenly, the world stops. The umpire checks the scoreboard. The crowd holds its breath, and you realize you don't just have a chance to win, you have the chance to change your life forever. It's the kind of moment that defines a career. But for Eala, that moment wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a dream. It was a bulletproof reality. She didn't wait for an invitation. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need a wild card. While other players were hoping for a lucky break, Eala was busy forging her own path. She wasn't just knocking on the door of the WTA's biggest stars. She was kicking it down. Now she's heading to Washington, D.C., not as a guest, but as a certified contender. But how did she get here? And what does it really? The story of Eala is not a story of luck. It's a story of relentless preparation. Born in the Philippines, a country passionate about basketball and boxing, Alex chose a different path. She picked up a tennis racket at a very young age, showing a natural talent that was impossible to ignore. While most kids her age were playing video games, she was grinding on the clay courts of Europe. At just 13 years old, she made a life-changing decision. She moved to Spain to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, a place where only the most promising and dedicated athletes go. It wasn't easy. She left her family and home behind to chase a vision that seemed almost impossible for someone from her country. In the tennis world, the Philippines wasn't known for producing Grand Slam champions. The odds were stacked against her from day one. But Alex didn't want to be a footnote. She wanted to be a headline. Her junior career was a clear signal of what was coming. She won the Australian Open junior title and reached the top of the junior world rankings. She proved she could beat the best players her age. But the pros are a different beast. They are stronger, faster, and more experienced. Many junior stars fade away, unable to handle the brutal physical and mental demands of the professional tour. The pressure is immense. It's a constant fight to stay relevant in a sport that chews up players and spits them out. People were watching, waiting to see if she could make the jump. But then came the shot that silenced the doubters. It was a moment that didn't just make the world notice. It made the world question if they had been sleeping on her all along. The shot that changed everything didn't come in Washington. It came on the pristine grass of Wimbledon, the most sacred stage in tennis. Eala walked onto center court, not as a favorite, but as a disruptor. Across the net stood Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, a player who had made a career out of crushing opponents with ruthless precision. The odds were brutal. The pressure was suffocating. And yet, in that moment, Eala didn't flinch. She played with the kind of controlled aggression that separates legends from talented players. The first set went to a tiebreaker, a nerve-shredding battle where every point felt like a match point. Swiatek had 2 set points, 2 chances to crush Eala's dream, but the young Filipino saved both, showing a mental toughness that left the crowd stunned. Then came the forehand winner on match point, and Eala dropped to her knees, rolling onto her back as the reality washed over her. She had just beaten the defending Wimbledon champion. She had made history as the first Filipino player, male or female, ever to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam singles tournament. The victory wasn't just a win, it was a statement. She had already beaten Swiatek before, during her breakthrough run to the Miami Open semifinals the previous year. This wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. And while her Wimbledon run eventually ended against Jasmine Paolini in the round of 16, she had already accomplished something far bigger. She had proven she belongs on the biggest stages. The tennis world was officially on notice. But for Eala, there was no time to celebrate. The real test was just beginning. After a short break, she would step onto the hard courts of Washington, D.C., a tournament stacked with some of the biggest names in the sport. The question wasn't if she could compete anymore. The question was if she could do it again, night after night, against players who would now be gunning for her. Greedon, the grass court season had been a whirlwind. Eala started it by capturing her second WTA 125 title in Birmingham, battling through a three-set final that tested her resilience. But that was just the warm-up. She carried that momentum into the WTA 500 event in Berlin, where she announced her arrival on the big stage in devastating fashion. She dismantled Donna Vekic in straight sets. Then she took down world number 2, Elena Rybakina, with the same clinical precision. Then came Iga Swiatek, ranked number 8 in the world. Eala crushed her too. 3 top-tier opponents, 3 straight-set victories. The tennis world was no longer just curious, they were terrified. Then came Wimbledon. The defending champion, Iga Swiatek, stood in her way. The same Swiatek who had demolished opponents to claim her first Wimbledon title the previous year. The pressure was immense, but Eala refused to break. She saved 2 set points in a brutal first-set tiebreaker, then slammed the door shut, winning 7-6, 6-2. On her third match point, she hit a forehand winner, dropped to her knees, and rolled onto her back. The center court crowd erupted. She was the first Filipino player ever to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam singles tournament. But as she looked up at the sky, the weight of history pressing down on her, she knew one thing for certain. The victory wouldn't mean anything if she couldn't back it up. And her next challenge was already waiting. Not just a new tournament, but a new surface, a new city, and a field of hungry stars looking to cut her down. The Washington, D.C. hard courts were waiting, but the weight of Wimbledon was still fresh on her shoulders. That run had done more than just make history. It had transformed her from a rising star into a national icon. When she walked off center court after falling to Jasmine Paolini in a grueling 3-set battle, the crowd didn't just applaud. They rose to their feet. Billie Jean King and Roger Federer were among those giving her a standing ovation. She had earned their respect. She had earned everyone's respect. But respect doesn't win matches. And the Mubadala D.C. Open wasn't going to be a victory lap. The draw was stacked with some of the most dangerous names in the sport. World number 8 Iga Swiatek, the same pair Eala had dismantled in Berlin, was confirmed. So was Marta Kostyuk, Naomi Osaka, and her good friend Iva Jovic. These weren't players who would roll over. They were veterans and powerhouses looking to make their own statements on the American hard courts. The pressure was immense, and the expectations back home in the Philippines had never been higher. Thousands had packed the Phil Sports Arena just to watch her Wimbledon match on a big screen. Now, they were dreaming bigger. And yet, as she prepared to step onto the court in Washington, the most important detail was already settled. She was here on her own terms. No wild card. No special invitation. She had earned her spot through blood, sweat, and a relentless climb up the WTA rankings. But the question that hung in the air was the one that every great athlete must answer. After the biggest moment of your career, can you do it again? The sun was setting over the nation's capital, the stadium lights were flickering on, and Eala was about to find out. The Washington, D.C. hard courts were always the goal. But between the grass of Wimbledon and the American swing, Eala had to prove that her historic run wasn't just lightning in a bottle. She had to prove she could handle the grind. She went to Abu Dhabi for the WTA 500 event, and the Filipino fans showed up in full force. The stadium was packed, the atmosphere electric, and Eala fed off every cheer. She opened with a straight-set victory over Zeynep Sonmez, winning in just over an hour. The crowd erupted. The Philippine ambassador was there to watch. The momentum was building. Then came the test. Alexandra Sasnovich stood across the net, and the match turned into a war. Eala dropped the first set. She fought back to take the second. And then, in the deciding set, she found herself down 4-0. It was the kind of hole that breaks most players. The kind of moment where doubt creeps in. where the body screams, where the pressure of expectations becomes suffocating. But Eala didn't break. She looked at the crowd, felt their energy, and started climbing back. Point by point, game by game, she clawed her way out of the hole, forcing a dramatic tiebreak that had the stadium on its feet. And when she finally closed it out, after nearly 3 hours of battle, the celebration was deafening. She had done it again. She had proven that her Wimbledon heroics weren't a fluke. She was a fighter, a closer, a champion in the making. Her run eventually ended in the quarterfinals against Ekaterina Alexandrova. But the message was clear. Eala wasn't just surviving on the tour. She was thriving. She was climbing the rankings, earning her spot, and making the world take notice with every single swing. Now, the spotlight turns to Washington. The Mubadala D.C. Open awaits, a star-studded field featuring Svitolina, Osaka, and Kostyuk. The expectations are higher than ever. The pressure is real. But for Eala, none of that matters. She's